I was not among the lucky horde that got to play the Dark Souls 3 network test, so you won't be seeing footage of that game while I talk. Instead, please enjoy these handful of boss fights from Bloodborne that I otherwise wouldn't show. I have watched as much footage as I can of the network test, and I have a few thoughts to share. I also want to take this opportunity to comment on Miyazaki's announcement that Dark Souls 3 would be the final game of the Soulsborne universe. Those aren't his exact words, but we'll go over that in a bit. Alright, firstly, the Dark Souls 3 network test. I remember when I participated in the Dark Souls 2 network test, and how when I turned it off I had a sour feeling in my stomach. There was just something about the game that I knew was going to be a disappointment, and my gut ended up telling me correctly. I did not get to play the Bloodborne alpha, but the footage I watched made me feel all kinds of excitement, and that also ended up proving true. Now, this is a personal testimony that perhaps only applies to one person, me, but hot damn am I excited after watching the Dark Souls 3 network test footage. There's something so Demon Souls-y about it, combined with the better pacing of Bloodborne and certainly some of the improved mechanics from Dark Souls 2. It appeared as if it will play both fast and fresh, and the single environment we saw was both of great physical design and visual. It had an atmosphere that was reminiscent of the Undead Parish and Boletaria Castle. The Dancer boss came off as both unique and visually stunning, though perhaps not all that difficult. The Cleric Beast originally threw many players for a loop because of how fast Bloodborne had made the combat. But now that it is a touch slowed again in Dark Souls 3, I don't think a boss like the Dancer is going to be on par for what the difficulty was set to in Bloodborne. Speaking of the Dancer, however, I want to quickly become giddy over a lore concept that has already found its way into my mind. The weapons the Dancer uses are rather reminiscent of Kieran's Tracer Blades, one gold and one silver. Now it could be a coincidence, but her style of attacking is also similar enough, so what if there is some connection between the two? That could mean that 3 other bosses will have a connection to the other 3 Knights of Gwyn's. I really shouldn't jump ahead like that, so let's talk about the MP bar because I'm definitely not certain it's a good idea. The best change, in my opinion, when jumping from Demon Souls to Dark Souls, was the specific limit on casting and healing. It created a continual world of exact challenges the player had to overcome. Now I know that, from what we've seen so far, the MP bar is only refilled by a specific number of MP flasks. This means that you still only get so many casts per spell, however many can be used before having to refill the meter with a flask. It also means that there is an opportunity to create dynamic mind challenges of selecting to use certain spells over others while maintaining not only a watch of the MP bar, but finding ways to not run out before reaching the next bonfire. And I also know that it means that, if you break it down by comparing numbers, it's essentially the same system. It's simply a matter of how many times the spell in question can be cast, except with the added benefit of juggling other spells around the MP bar. It also comes down to a matter of balance, the game being appropriately challenging enough to counteract the use of an MP bar. I know all of that, and yet still I am nervous as fuck that an MP bar has returned. Nervous because of how spells were handled in Dark Souls 2 and in Demon Souls. In Demon Souls, you could easily have unlimited cast due to the MP refresh consumables and MP regen gear, and then on top of that, the spells were so damn powerful that most of the game was a joke. In Dark Souls 2, it started out that spells were of average power, useful and yet not overbearing. Then came more and more consumables that would refresh their cast, and along with them came nerfs. Spells in Dark Souls 2 are basically pointless now because casts are far too easy to replenish, and so they have been nerfed into nothingness. I don't want that to happen in Dark Souls 3, and I wish I could say I trusted FromSoft on this, but they only got the balance correct in half of the Soulsborne games thus far. And if we are going every other, then Dark Souls 3 will be another fucked up MP system. Speaking of being nervous, it's hard to know at this time whether or not a White Phantom being of force presence for invasions is a good thing or a bad thing. On one hand, it topples the odds automatically against the invader. They are selecting to invade, but they should still have a decent chance of killing their target. On the other hand, typically when invaded, a host will not be ready by any means to combat another player. They could be struggling just to deal with some of the common enemies, or pushing hard to the boss and be low on HP and spells. The odds are most certainly stacked against a host unless they are waiting around expecting an invader to show. to always have a white at their side, who, by the way, might also be low on HP and spells, could serve to make the invasions fair. I suppose that brings up the question of whether or not an invasion should, in fact, be fair. It's a tough one to answer, because I can see both sides of the argument pretty clearly. You're invading, attempting to murder, and murder should never be fair. On the other hand, it's a damn video game, and some people want to play it fairly even when somebody else wants to murder them. That really does make sense, and is true of every other multiplayer game, or at least it's supposed to be. The real answer is that while I think I agree it's a smart move to have a white there at all times, there probably should be different kinds of invasions. There should even be one that allows someone to invade without a white being there, but perhaps only in certain zones or with a different penalty against them. And of course, dueling signs should absolutely exist without the presence of a white. It'll be straight up fucking stupid if you can't duel in safety. The dumb combination coming into play in Dark Souls 3 is that, from what we've seen thus far, when you invade you not only have a white to deal with, but have a stunted HP bar as well. So stupid. One or the other, definitely not both. I hope this is something they fix, or perhaps limit this double penalty to only one kind of invasion. The last thing I want to comment on are the new backstabs. Yes, they are a lot like the first Dark Souls game, and that could easily be a very bad thing. I've also seen a video in which a guy backstabbed 2 different players at once, and that is downright scary. The main thing I hated about Dark Souls PvP were the backstabs, to the point that I couldn't stand playing anymore. I've always said, and will always insist, that an actual backstab animation that pauses the battle and deals a significant amount of damage is a god-awful concept. All it should be is bonus damage done, a hit on the back scoring an additional 20% damage or some such thing. The good news is that in Dark Souls 3 there is a version of this. It would seem that if you swing and miss landing a backstab, but are still within range to have your weapon strike the player, you will connect for a hit. This seems obvious, but in Dark Souls 2 there was a whiff animation that drove me crazy. They at least fixed the missed backstabs, but I'm still not crazy about their return to Dark Souls stature. I'm prepared to get fed up with the PvP before 2016 is over. So let's move on to our next topic, that of Dark Souls 3 possibly being the last of the Soulsborne titles. To quote Miyazaki, "I don't think it would be the right choice to continue indefinitely creating Souls and Bloodborne games. I'm considering Dark Souls 3 to be the big closure on the series. That's not just limited to me, but FromSoft and myself together want to aggressively make new things in the future. Dark Souls 3 will mark the last game where the development project began before I became president. The next title will be a game that was conceived while I was president. I believe that FromSoft has to create new things. There will be new types of games coming from us, and Dark Souls 3 is an important marker in the evolution of FromSoft. That is a lot to dissect and go through, but let me say this before we dive in further. In the event that another Soulsborne game does not get made, I will be both unhappy and accepting. Just from a personal standpoint, Demon's Souls not only contributed to helping me out of a severe depression, possibly saving my life, but it's also scratched a gaming itch that had been lost for a long time. Then Dark Souls took many of the things that made Demons great and compounded them, adding in the best monster fights I've seen yet. It truly is a gem of gaming in my opinion. However, the next 2 games, while both deserving of their lineage and worthy of being played, fell short on levels that made me cringe. They both instilled a form of disappointment in me that I did not expect either time. Of course, with that said, I would buy a new Souls game every year if I could. Twice if they happen to come up like Bloodborne and Scholar of the First Sin. They are, without argument even possible in my opinion, the greatest kind of game that has ever been invented. As someone who has been playing games for 30 years now, I don't think that anything will ever impress me as much as Demon's Souls and Dark Souls, or make me feel as digitally happy. Alright, now that my disclaimer of being able to accept the truth is out of the way, let's pick apart Miyazaki's quote. Let's dismantle the fucking thing and find the conspiracy theory belief buried within. First line, Miyazaki states that he doesn't think it would be right to indefinitely create Soulsborne games. That word choice does not suggest that the end needs to be prompt, but rather that it must end at some point. Just as an example, perhaps he doesn't want the series to become another Ass Creed or Call of Duty. There is some merit to that, since those games are more like seasons returning than a game being released. However, it could mean that there are a few more games of Soulsborne to be seen in the future. Second line, that Dark Souls 3 is the closure to the series. Makes sense to me in two different ways. One, it fulfills their contract with the crappy Bamco, and two, 3 titles are usually what it takes to play out a whole story. I could definitely see Dark Souls 3 being the last Dark game, and then perhaps they can begin a new Souls series, or perhaps a long-awaited Demon Souls 2. Miyazaki goes on to state that Dark Souls 3 was the last game begun before he became president, and that the next game will be his first presidential title. Good, all good. Dark Souls 3 fulfills a contract and sticks to a basically known formula. The next game could change up a lot of things, and Miyazaki will be fully free to experiment and pursue whatever ideas he sees as best. It could mean ramping up the series in terms of changes, the way Bloodborne surprised a lot of people. At the end he states that FromSoft needs to create new things, and that Dark Souls 3 is an important marker in their evolution. It's the final chapter of the series that made them famous. Demons got them notoriety, but it was the first Dark Souls game that brought them a large profit and recognition across the internet. Dark Souls 3 could be a showing of how far they've come, and what to expect in the future. As far as creating new games, that could be a move of more intelligence than detectable on the surface. It's been a rush of Soulsborne games since 2009, with a new game after 2 years, then a year and a half, then 1 year, and then a remake a few months later. It's worked for them too, with more notoriety and positive reputation each title. The thing is, the mood and challenge of these games is getting stale. I'm not personally bored or wanting them to stop. I actually stopped playing the recently released Fallout 4 because I wanted more Bloodborne back in my life. However, I know a portion of the audience are becoming tired of the Soulsborne formula. They need a break, and I'm sure FromSoft wants a break as well. But also, and more importantly, if they use this newly gained fame appropriately, they can create new IPs that turn into successful selling series, growing the company exponentially. And then, a new Souls-type game can be created every few years, 3 or more, and it will not feel as if too much time has passed. With other series distracting the needy, like me, it won't be a big deal if Soulsborne 6 doesn't come out until 2018, or even 2019. On top of that, just look at what they can create with rushed work. There's some truly great things going on in Dark Souls 2, Bloodborne, and their respective DLCs. Imagine a Souls game that had 3 independent years of development. Imagine the level design, bosses, and lore. It could very well be that FromSoft and Miyazaki realize this as well. It's actually a super smart move to release the Soulsborne reigns for the time being, allowing the series to breathe. Even if they announce that another game isn't in the future, I'll be damned if they are truly done. It's put them on the map with all the other AAA developers. Even if they technically aren't, they won't possibly allow it to die off completely. I also sincerely doubt that there will only be a single Bloodborne game. Even if FromSoft believes that they are done, I expect Sony to send them an offer they can't refuse to secure a sequel or two.